Welcome to the Parkinson's podcast Unfiltered with hosts Heather Kennedy and Kat Hill, brought to you by the Davis Phinney Foundation. Heather is originally from New York and was diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's in 2011 when she was 40. Kat is originally from a small town in California and was diagnosed in 2015 when she was 48. Heather and Kat have been friends since they met at the World Parkinson Congress in 2019. In each episode, Heather and Kat dive deep into the raw emotions and realities of life with Parkinson's.
You know, you can go by ambivalence, you can go by curiosity or ambition or desperation, but it's still going to come up. You still have to go through it. We can pretend it's not there, but it's always there. You can pretend to play the role of conductor and act like you have control, but that's an illusion. What are we speaking about today? Uncertainty.
Uncertainty. Life is just full of uncertainty for everybody, right?
Yes. But that illusion of control is the interesting part. If we can let go of a little bit of our so-called control and disabuse ourselves of the idea that we can contain everything, maybe it could be a little easier to deal with that uncertainty. What do you think, Kat?
I think you're really onto something, Heather. And I think one of probably the biggest challenges for me of navigating this act 2 in my life, which includes the diagnosis of Parkinson's, has been to learn to let go of control, or this illusion of control, the illusion of if I can plan it, I can do it.
And careful planning, as we know, comes with an amount of foresight. It requires some executive functioning to be in place. You know, might be impinged upon or compromised, shall we say, with the Parkinson's dynamic and the medications, the lack of sleep. I don't know about you, but it's hard for me to walk and chew gum at the same time, even on a good day. So I'm someone that never really needed to know all the answers. For example, let's say that your friend is throwing a party, and your friend is also my friend. And you may call me and say, what are you wearing? Where do we park? Who's coming? What do I bring? What kind of a party is this? And I'll say, I don't know. And you'll say, well, don't you want to know? And I'll be, no, I want to be surprised. Maybe that's my personality. If that's my personality, I'm going to go with the flow a little bit more. It doesn't mean that I'm more relaxed. It just means that I'm not used to knowing ahead. The person who might be used to knowing ahead, i.e. the more contained and scheduled person, might bring them a lot of, it just disorients them. It dysregulates them to not know ahead what to expect. So our expectations come into play here. Ooh, what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah. And I think, Heather, life is fraught with this, right? And I think the more that we live, the more we realize how little control we really get. And I have the privilege of being married to a pretty remarkable man, as you know, who I've mentioned on the pod before, but he navigates uncertainty in a more graceful, natural way than I do. And it has taken me a lot of practice and watching others that I admire, you being on the top of that list, who navigate that uncertainty with grace and heart and laughter and humor, because it was a very hard thing for me to learn to let go of and to learn to live with, because certainty was where I was certain. For lack of a better word, certainty is where I thrived. My day planner and I were at one with each other often, and it's how I got through college and parenthood and a career, and to all of a sudden have no certainty about anything is frightening. And I've also heard, it was interesting, I was having a conversation with some folks from the foundation who were looking at the annual survey that asks, what do we want more of? What do we want less of in terms of programming? We, meaning people with Parkinson's or those that love people with Parkinson's. And it was shared that a lot of us wish there was more information about what to expect. And isn't that what we all want about everything, right?
Well, some of the challenges to that might include if you've met one person with Parkinson's, you've met one person with Parkinson's. It's our famous statement. So it's very hard to say, well, here's what you can expect, 'cause here's what I'm experiencing. And often when I'm in support groups, they're not really that interested in hearing the down and dirty stuff. Like they don't really want to know that they'll be incontinent. And maybe they won't. Maybe I won't,
Right. Will I need a wheelchair? Will I need a walker? Will I need DBS? And I think we all want to know the answers, and yet we may not want to know the answers. And I also think our providers, our doctors, our nurses, our physical therapists, our massage therapists don't know what to tell us either, because it's so different and unique. And perhaps, and not perhaps, my experience, albeit just my own, is that maybe the gold here is learning how to let go of all of that. And how do we spend more time on the right now and not about what's coming?
I knew we'd be on the same wavelength.
We didn't even have to write this, folks.
This is why we don't speak a lot before these recordings, because if it's too planned, it never goes well. Because I want to be the fun, spontaneous one. I want to be the actress. I don't want to be the actress at all. I want to be the improv artist who stays here now with you in the moment, with a live, breathing being who's right in front of me, instead of looking at my phone like every other person on the planet seems to be doing. I'm that maniac standing in the coffee line at Starbucks talking to people, making eye contact, like we talked about before. So you and I don't want to be a drag. We don't want to be the one that people call and they give us their list of things to do, their neurotic list, because they're feeling bad about not contacting us. We don't want to be a drag unless we're a drag queen. But there's such uncertainty, And so we don't know. We may have to cancel out the meeting half an hour before it begins, or 5 minutes before it begins. Today I made pancakes that look like scrambled eggs. They tasted fine, but if you expected to get pancakes on a plate, you would have been deeply disappointed.
Me trying to bake, there's all kinds of uncertainty in that, and has been for a very long time, I might add.
Right? I mean, talk about that. But here's an idea. Let's say that I'm expecting something like, I'm expecting all mothers to be nurturing to their children. That's an unenforceable rule that we talked about before. There's no way to have that expectation. I'm expecting my baby to be healthy. I'm expecting this talk to go well. I'm expecting us to get along. Let's say that we do. I might say, I wonder what happened there. I might call you after the recording and say, hey, are you okay? Are we okay? Can we discuss? In other words, well, let me just back up a minute. Let me start over. To deal with uncertainty, two things: faith in something bigger than yourself, or acceptance that what will come will come. Both are like, I'm not in charge. Whether you do it this way or another way, it doesn't really matter. Hold up the good book.
And the good book, it could be any good book. I have a good book too. It's called Mindful Sketching.
There you go. Between mindful sketching and the Bible will be fun.
Perfect.
For something.
Any book.
Yeah. I'm not proselytizing.
No. But I think, Heather, for me, it took a lot of unlearning. And this was, for me, way pre-Parkinson's diagnosis. So this is really about like personality style or whatever you want to call it, how you were born, birth order, I don't know. I had to unlearn that it's okay to not get everything on your to-do list done in a day. It's okay and not failing to have to cancel a meeting. It's not losing the day. It's not a flaw in character to have limits or even to set boundaries. And at the ripe old age of, I always forget how old I am. I'm not 60 yet, but I'm not 55. So somewhere in that realm, I'm finally learning how to be realistic a little bit with those boundaries, and also how to discuss uncertainty with those that we love, because our uncertainty becomes about physically what we can do and what we can't do and how we show up. And I may be able to promise that I'll show up, but I may need to be laying down when I do it if my head's shaking too much, or I might be frozen. But it doesn't mean that I don't want to be there with you. It's not that I want to be late. It's that that's just my world now.
I've been much more generous with people now that I am disabled. And I want to make the distinction. When I use the word disabled here, I recognize I'm not a person who's been disabled her whole life. I'm not, the type of person who has been in a wheelchair or understands it. So it's kind of new to me. So I keep thinking I can do the things like you just said. I'll meet you at 3, might be 3:30. So you and all my other friends have to be super lax.
It's the learning and also the unlearning, right? And I think it's universal, Heather. Don't you find this with not just our Parkinson's peer group, but anybody that's aging or has life experience has to learn some of these things.
And it's not as simple as saying to someone, you're not the center of the universe. Why are you getting so upset about the plan that you had that we couldn't all get on the bus with, But it's not like that. For example, I like the wacky British comedies, such as Terry Gilliam's Brazil. Only to bet that character did not expect that day to go quite like that. We don't expect these things. And so we can plan for the worst, but I am the opposite. I get anxious. Everything's going really well. I'm like, whoa, where's the other shoe? When is it going to drop? I'm expecting uncertainty.
That's interesting. I would have to say I've had moments of that myself. Our family used to talk about having New Year's resolutions or those kinds of things. And we stopped after a while because we were setting up expectations for ourselves, whether it was losing 25 pounds, right? There's the age-old one, the weight loss thing. And then this is going to be the year where we're all really healthy. None of us are going to be in the hospital.
Oh, right. We'll make handmade gifts for Christmas, too. It'll go great. My teen friends will love it.
That's right. I'm going to get all my Christmas cards out by the 2nd of December.
Okay, so we can have strong opinions and beliefs and ideas, but weakly hold them. So hold them sort of like this rather than like clutching them. And therein lies the rub. If you can be comfortable with uncertainty, as Pema Chodron says in her famous book, Comfortable with Uncertainty, you could at least pause and go, wow, this isn't quite what I had planned. I didn't think I was going to get bumped in the head today, or I didn't think I was going to lose my mind today. But since I have, what do I do now? It's that resilient piece.
Or even as simple as, I didn't think I was going to run out of toothpaste today.
Right.
Am I going to let running out of toothpaste completely derail my morning and set the tone for the whole day? And it's not that I want to belittle those that get derailed by those things, because those accumulation of disappointments or not meeting expectations can be huge. It's not that I want to belittle that. It's that if we can learn in the moment to accept that we don't have control. And I use the phrase a lot. This, again, may not be helpful to anybody but me, but is anybody going to die if I'm late? Is anybody going to die if I show up frozen, or if I call and say, I just can't do it? What happens to that?
Charles Bukowski would agree with you. It is the swarm of life's trivialities that send a man to the madhouse, he said. It's not the cancer. It's not the loss. It's the broken shoelace with no time left. It's the crack in the windshield. All that extreme trivialities. Someone once asked, what is the most surprising shoe? When you're waiting for the other shoe to drop, what's so surprising? It'll usually be something that knocks me into the reality of whatever I was worried about was not that big of a deal. There's something bigger coming around to hit from another direction that we had never anticipated. And it makes the thing that we were so anxious about seem very tiny and insignificant. By pulling the lens back, look at the bigger picture. All my plans are not that important.
And Heather, through the Parkinson's lens now, I'd like to talk about, I know for me, one of the most challenging parts is that I used to be a really, really good multitasker. I could follow several trains of thought about different issues simultaneously and maintain that. And I can't do that anymore. It's not that I've lost intelligence. I've just lost the ability to be intelligent about more than one thing at a time. That's how I try to define it. And Parkinson's has brought me the opportunity. I'm trying to be graceful in my wording.
Right. The opportunity.
Yeah. Oh, great. Not another learning opportunity. To try to find grace in that, to try to even acknowledge that it's okay if I can't think of 5 things and follow 5 trains of thoughts at once, and to have patience for others. You said that it brought new compassion. And I think realizing that neurologic disease, not just Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, MS, all kinds of things can impact the way that we think and the way that we present to the world. And does it serve us to know ahead of time that that's coming? I don't know.
That was a big question, genetic testing. I had a lot of people, I asked them to do genetic testing in my family, and they said, what if I don't really want to know? And I said, well, you could always just ask for the actionable results, which actionable means things that you can actually control. For example, if you're going to be obese, you could work out more, whatever, something like that. Or if you're going to have a food allergy or prone to that, you can avoid that food, etc. But you mentioned emotional intelligence. I want to go back to that. It's really important to note when I said you have to either have faith or that ability to accept and let go, either one, I am powerless. The ego in all of us needs a job. The ego will fill in stories, as we know. I'm a great storyteller up here. My mind is wild when we don't have all the answers. And the unknown is the most terrifying thing to the ego, because the ego is always jockeying for control. So it's kind of like a cattle dog. We need to give the ego something to do, which is why I don't write in complete silence. I need to serve a den. A library won't be best for me to be a cafe. You already have this down. You do not think that you're in control, Kat. You already know this. Some people, like myself, I still think that I am sometimes. I will book things too close together. Parkinson's, we must give ourselves some time to breathe. We must add in the point that where we will be exhausted by social events. We will be exhausted by things that cause us to use our executive functioning and our logic at a high rate, because incoming information is not separated like it was before. Incoming information comes in a blob.
It's a cacophony. I love that word.
The symphony of cacophonies.
A cacophony of stimulus.
Oh, that is so good.
Ken can often tell when I'm feeling that because I close my eyes, because closing my eyes stops the visual input, or putting noise canceling headphones stops the auditory input. It's an overwhelming experience, and it is all consuming. And it's hard to explain that to people. That's not something that people look and they say, oh, she's got a tremor, she's got cognitive impairment, she can't multitask. It's one of those unseen symptoms. Before we get too sidetracked on that, speaking of which.
Yeah, divergent thinkers unite.
I want to
read it here. What's going on over here?
Yeah. Oh, it's only an incurable progressive brain disease.
Yeah, right.
That's what we're talking about. But this whole idea of, do you want to know? I think that waiting, the idea of genetic testing, do you want to know if you're more at risk of developing a chronic illness? And for many, that's like waiting for it to happen. So does that then take away spontaneity and living in the moment for many people? And, that's a real public health ethical question, right? Are we serving people by letting them know, or is it a disservice? And there's evidence that points to both of those things.
And different generations have different ways of speaking about these things. So when we see statistics, someone might say there are only 40% who have said they've ever struggled with depression. You go to the generations before ours, people didn't talk about that openly. You didn't tell someone you were depressed because it meant weakness, especially to the males of that generation. The males of that generation are going to say, I'm fine, and avoid the doctor. Whereas our generation, we might want to talk about it. Depression, we understand it presents as like anger or anxiety or restlessness. It has many masks. And these masks are adding to all of this too, this uncertainty. Like, what's wrong with me? From a study found in 2019, since we were on the topic of being distracted, hello, squirrel.
Uh-huh. A squirrel.
I'm like a pretty squirrel. A squirrel with ADD. People with ADHD diagnosis were shown to have more than twofold increased risk of a subsequent diagnosis with the basal ganglia-related conditions. Now, basal ganglia, you say that 5 times fast, you get a free pony. Basal ganglia-related conditions include Parkinson's. And this was a study from 2019 of almost 200,000 people. That's a tremendous.
That's a large study sample.
Yes. So for us, it's really important to know we're being really hard on ourselves at a certain point, right? Let's say there's uncertainty, because there is. Like, for example, that party, you find out that someone's coming that you don't like ahead of time. So you get there and you're really anxious about talking to this person. So you go over in the corner with the sweaty cheese, and you talk to some guy who's living next door, who then tells you his whole life story. And you're upset that you got stuck with him. You're so busy trying to avoid Susie, you got stuck with this other guy, And it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy to try to arrange things. And that's when it starts to go wrong. But if I say, hey, I'm just going to let the chips fall where they may, show up at the party with my best face, and I can run interference for Kat, that's enough joy for me.
Actually, just showing up to a party with you would bring me great joy, Heather.
Oh, me too. What are we wearing? Oh, wait, you don't need to know. There'd be nothing.
I also think that back to that whole idea of the multitasking in the midst of a party, I'm not even sure that I could back plan all that, because of the spoons it takes, of the mind plane that it takes to manage a conversation with someone, and then also to be thinking about this back channeling of who I want to see and not want to see.
Right. There you go. A lot of space, a lot of headspace we don't have. A lot of energy we don't have.
A lot of energy we don't have. And I think also, Heather, don't you have days where, you'll have the best laid plans? Today's a good example. I knew we had this podcast coming, right? And I'm super excited because I always get excited to see you and to see our Davis Phinney folks. And I'm like, okay, I need to get a good night's sleep, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And then I can't sleep worth beans, right? So the best laid plans. And so I could have fretted about that. I could have gotten up early and fussed about it and gotten into a tizzy and then run out of toothpaste. I know I've said it twice, but I did have to open new toothpaste this morning.
You smell minty fresh to me. I don't know how you got it open, those Parkinson's hands, though.
I use the back of my toothbrush to scoot it up on the thing.
I knew you had a method. Do you hear that, everybody? Use the back of the toothbrush to scoot it up on the thing.
That's right. And trying to open it, the little tiny foil caps. Don't tell my dad, who's a dentist, I use my teeth to do it. But we digress. Imagine that. We digress. So the best laid plans. And yet here I am. I'm having a great time with you here in this moment. We're talking about how this uncertainty, we can let it derail us. We can let it define us, or we can keep going and learn to find joy in the moment and try to focus on not having control, of surrendering control. The seasons are going to change. The sun is going to come up if we're lucky. The leaves are going to fall in the fall. And they're going to do that whether or not we got a good night's sleep, whether or not our toothpaste is full or not, whether or not we have a run in our stockings. That's a super old saying. So we must find peace in that.
So what can we do about uncertainty? Uncertainty can also be kind of exciting. For example, you have a lover who is not predictable versus a lover who's totally predictable. Now, I'm going offline a little bit here, or off topic, just briefly as we end, because I wanted to say that's sort of what we can expect. And when you see that both things can be true, that there's something comforting about that predictability, the devil you know, or the angel you know, versus the unpredictability, which is a little sprinkle of like some spice. Do we want all spice or all bland? You know, like we don't, both things make a meal. Like cake with icing.
Like scrambled egg pancakes.
Yes, blueberry mush. Tasted fabulous, but had I served it to guests, you might not come back.
Heather, I always learn something from our talks, and I love Pema Chodron. I've read a lot of her work, and it has helped me understand what uncertainty is and that it's really everywhere. And I loved her book, When Things Fall Apart.
Ooh, me too.
It's a really good one if one is in sort of crisis mode. And it helps me to talk about it. It helps me to know that I'm not the only one kind of fighting this idea that anything is certain and that I can plan anything.
I was just looking for a quote from Pema Chodron. And as I did that, my phone let me know there's no one with that name in your contact list. Just thanks, phone. I was trying to go out with a big bang, like be the smart one and slide in the quote.
I'm impressed, Heather.
I remember a quote from her, though, that I did.
Okay.
I did hear it live. I was delivering books to her once, and I said, Ani Pema. I dropped the books, and I bowed, and she said, what are you doing? I'm just grandma here. Enough of it. Come on in. Here's your books. And then it was, quick, I'm out of there. But she was like so down to earth, and it was unexpected. I was told to bow when you met one of your teachers along the road. And she sort of waved it away like, are you joking with me? I'm just a grandma in this house. It was really wonderful. Not what I expected. And alternately, when I met you, I thought you were going to be mad at me for flirting with your husband, who's so lovely. But you came out of the room and you said, sister, it's you. You embraced me, and I thought, man, life is good. I'm so lucky.
Yeah, and we were successful in logging on. I mean, there's a good day. There's a good day.
Powers.
The only thing that is certain is that we're going to keep showing up for one another. Heather.
That's right.
And there's beauty in that. There's beauty in that, my friend. Have a good day. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Parkinson's podcast Unfiltered with Heather Kennedy and Kat Hill. For more information about the Davis Phinney Foundation and to learn about educational offerings and community events for people affected by Parkinson's, please visit davisphinneyfoundation.org or dpf.org. This podcast includes information about Parkinson's and insights from our Parkinson's community. It is not intended as a substitute for treatment advice from your own medical providers.